Ugh, son of a bitch. Of course, the one movie theater within driving distance, and it doesn't show Godzilla Minus One. Now what the hell am I gonna do for a video? I mean, it's not like another beloved tokusatsu series is gonna break through the fucking wall. Well, shit. So, yeah. Garo's back. Kind of went quiet for a year or two after Versus Road was a thing. Not sure if there was an official reason why the series went on hiatus, but considering it was the 2020s, I think everyone here can guess why. So I'm assuming that everyone who's watching this video already knows what a Garo is and how the world works, but just in case you don't, I'll give a very brief explanation. Garo is an adult-oriented tokusatsu series that came out during the early 2000s. A lot of Westerners like to describe it as Power Rangers for adults, which isn't an inapt comparison, but I think does a lot of disservice to what Garo really is. It's one of the most creative and stylized shows I've seen coming out of Japan, tokusatsu or otherwise. And while like many of its peers it does have heavy elements of horror and dark fantasy, it's not nearly as grim or violent as you would expect an adult-oriented show to be. Garo is the type of series where despite how dark and tragic things can get, the hero is just as a beacon of hope and inspiration that you would see with its more younger age counterparts. Also, the costumes are really cool and the fight scenes are really fun to watch, so there's that too. As for the world itself, Garo takes place in a world where, for God knows how long, these demonic creatures known as horrors have been crossing over from their dimension to ours in order to corrupt, destroy, and ultimately feed off humanity because they're assholes like that. In response, a secret organization of knights and priests are founded in order to combat these monsters using a series of specialized weapons and equipment that are equal parts stylish and marketable. The poster boy of this organization, known as the Makai Order, is Garo, the Golden Knight. Now, Garo isn't actually a person, but the title of the special suit of armor that's passed down from generation to generation. Whoever its holder is considered the greatest among the Makai Knights. In other words, they tend to be baited in the protagonist's role pretty often. I mean, it is the title of the show after all. Though there are many other Makai Knights, some of which has even got their own spin-off shows. Looking at you, Zero. Today we're going to look at the most recent addition to the Garo mythos, Heir to Steel Armor, the next chapter in the Ryugaverse timeline. Ah shit, I gotta explain that too, don't I? So yeah, Garo's got multiple different timelines. Now don't worry, you don't have to worry about any multiversal crossover shenanigans like you would with a modern Marvel movie or something. For the most part, every Garo continuity has a world that operates more or less the same, with the current holder of the Garo armor maybe being from a different lineage or having some slightly different powers from another one. Other than that though, a thing still applies. Makai Knights and priests fighting horrors. In the Ryugaverse, the current holder of the Garo armor is of course Ryuga, no duh, who at this point in this series is a well-seasoned Makai Knight who's had his own adventure or two, which I'm not going to explain here because A, they're not really that relevant to this current season, and B, probably better if you experience those seasons for yourselves. Speaking of which, yeah, expect spoilers for this video, so if you haven't already checked out Heir to Steel Armor, go check out Heir to Steel Armor. Any live-action season of Garo tends to be a pretty safe bet when it comes to quality. Well, I will warn you right now, Garo does also have some anime seasons, which are kinda hit or miss. Those are definitely videos from another time, so let's just move on. The story begins with Ryuga being on his regular horror patrol when he's encountered by a Makai priest named, I'm definitely gonna butcher some of these names because I don't speak a lick of Japanese, Koyori, who is stationed in the, oh god, I can't believe they actually call this, in the city of Kree City, or is it just Kree City? Kree City. Kree City? Hydro City Zone. She's been trying to recruit other members of the Order for help as there's kind of a situation going on in her city. See, apparently right below the damn thing is an ancient, ginormous gate that's holding back a fuck ton of horrors. It was sealed away thousands of years ago by the Order, but now it's beginning to open. And to make matters worse, the city's Makai Knight has mysteriously disappeared. Ryuga, being the gentleman he is, agrees to help her out and the two head to the city, where almost immediately the increased horror presence is noticed. See, normally in order for a horror to enter the human world, it has to possess a human who's already predisposed to negative emotions. But due to the influence of the gate cracking open a bit, More and more people are now succumbing to negative emotions unnaturally. Things are only going to get worse if they don't hurry. It doesn't take long for Koriri and Ryuga to encounter horror, but it's soon dispatched by another Makai Knight named Soma. Soma is both the apprentice and son of the Makai Knight who disappeared, and has been holding down the fort while his father's been gone. But despite the desperate situation that's going on, Soma is less than thrilled to see the Golden Knight in his city. One thing Ryuga immediately notes about Soma is that he wields a type of armor known as Hagane. Think of Hagane as like a generic set of Makai armor. While just as functional as any other suit, it lacks the title or stylized design that you would see from like the Garo armor. Hagane has actually appeared in the series a few times prior, but usually in CGI or animated form. The Heir to Steel armor is the first time where Hagane is given an actual physical suit, and I gotta say, the suit designers gave it quite the glow up. I wasn't a fan of Hagane armor previously. I mean, just the idea of generic suit of armor when you have these beautiful stylized suit like the Garo armor, the Zero armor, etc. The idea of a generic boring armor kinda hit me the wrong way, but seeing them in the flesh like this, gotta say, started to change my mind a bit. After the horror's been dispatched, the three return to the city HQ where they meet up with Mitsugi, who is the head priestess of the area. Like Korei, she's been trying to get help from as many knights as she can. Problem being is that Soma doesn't seem to be getting along with the others. While Soma does show great skill as a Makai Knight, he's been really standoffish with the others and is really desperate to prove himself, trying to compensate for his father's disappearance, as he sort of fears that these knights are actually here to replace his father's position, which, while isn't true, you can understand why he's kind of freaking out. That being said, uncooperating with the team is the last thing they need right now, and many of the knights question why he isn't taking away to somewhere else for further training, because he's clearly still green, with Mitsugi kinda just walking around the question. But what really gets Soma's blood boiling is when one of the other knights brings up the idea that his father may have fallen to the dark side and may have been the one to crack open the gate in the first place, which unfortunately fallen knights and priests is a thing that happens occasionally, and when it does happen, it tends to have a pretty devastating effect on both the Order and the world, especially in his father's case where he's known to be highly skilled. Naturally, telling an already frustrated 20-something that his old man's gonna pull a Skywalker pisses Soma off and even threatens the other knights with violence, which is a big no-no within the Order. Now, to be fair, what the dude said about Soma's father was a pretty dick thing to do, and it doesn't take long for Soma to try and make amends, even if he kinda does it in the wrong way. He tries to give up his sword. Ryuga decides that he and Soma should have a one-on-one chat and tries to get through to him, but we learn that Ryoma's self-esteem issues have been going on even before his dad disappeared. It turns out, Soma's father actually rediscovered an ancient Makai Knight technique known as the Sword Flash, which involves converting dark energy into light energy and using it to beat the fuck out of a horror. The trick, however, is that in order to use the Sword Flash properly, the user has to be able to conquer their inner darkness, because if they do not and fail to convert that dark energy into light, then it will possess them and cause them to go berserk, which is exactly what happened to Soma the first time he attempted to use it. While he was able to return to his senses, it wasn't before he ended up injuring his father. We actually see in an early episode that Ryuga also has mastered the Sword Flash technique. Turns out in a flashback, he actually met Soma's father a few years prior and taught him the technique. I'd imagine that seeing the Golden Knight master your father's technique while you yourself haven't, didn't do the best for Soma's mental state either. Real quick side tangent, isn't it weird that it took the Garo writers almost 20 years to give their main character a finishing move? I mean, think about it, every other well-known tokusatsu character has some kind of finisher, right? Kamen Rider's got the Rider Kick, the Super Sentai's got their Team Attack, but Garo hasn't actually had, like, a finisher before, so the fact that they gave him one now, I mean, it's pretty cool, not gonna lie. Ryuga gives Soma some words of encouragement that helps him find his resolve, and he's once again able to resume his night duties once he has time to process. Soma's now also able to apologize to his fellow knights properly this time around, and he quickly makes amends. That's nice. After fighting some horrors and tracking down some MacGuffins, Ryuga, Soma, Kyori, and Mitsugi enter the labyrinth where the giant gate's being held, while the other Makai Knights stay behind to protect the city from horrors. This is where we get our big reveal, where it turns the perpetrator of this whole mess was actually Mitsugi. Yeah, it turns out she kinda went a little bonkers after an incident where she saved some people from horrors, only for those same people to go on to murder other people. and had attempted to open the gate 3 years ago before Soma's father sacrificed himself in order to keep the gate from opening any further, using his Zango armor as a seal. And now, after separating the group and using the gate's power to mind control Soma, uses him to break the seal, causing the gate to open fully. But since we have a character arc to complete, Soma is able to find strength to overcome the darkness and is able to gain control. Together with Kuga and Kodori, the three are able to subdue Mitsuki and stop her from brainwashing the whole city. But then Mitsuki gets possessed by a powerful horror, who then drags both of our knights into the gate and bombards them with dark energy. Don't you just hate it where you just finally beat the boss only to be revealed that it has a second form and another health bar? Always a pain in the ass. However, this dark energy actually comes to our hero's advantage. So remember the whole sword flash thing I mentioned earlier? Well, in the same flashback when Ruga was being trained into using the sword flash by Soma's father, he reveals that the sword flash actually has a sister technique which involves turning light energy into dark and using that to attack your opponent. And since Garo is being bombarded with dark energy right now, when life gives you lemons, Ryuga is able to pull off the Dark Sword Flash, which allows him and Soma to escape the gate, but they still need to close it before a horde of horrors is able to come out and destroy the city. Ryuga decides the best way to do so is to perform a double Sword Flash, which, since now Soma is able to conquer his inner darkness, he should be able to pull off. One little hiccup though. As soon as Ryuga tries to call his Garo armor back on, he's unable to use it because it's currently still covered in dark energy and thus unsafe to wield. Luckily, Ryuga is able to borrow a set of Hokage armor from another knight. Together he and Soma perform the double sword flash and are able to seal the gate. They aren't able to destroy it completely, however. There's probably not a force on the planet that can pull off something like that. So it is something they're going to have to keep their eye on. But for now, the day is in fact saved. Ryuga and the other knights go off to their next duties, while Soma and Kyori settle into their roles as the head protectors of Kree City. Overall, I believe Heir to Steel Armor is a very pleasant return to the Garo series. While not a bombastic return, I do enjoy the fact that it's just a nice, self-contained story that reintroduces people into the Garo universe, while also spotlighting a couple of things that previously have been pushed to the side. Like I stated earlier, the Hokage is a set of generic armor that was used by background characters within the Garo series, not something we'd ever see used by a main character. So the fact they actually spotlighted it and actually gave it a proper suit and not just making it a CGI puppet was a really pleasant surprise for me. It really changed my idea of the Hokage armor being a thing in the Garo universe. It was also really neat to see Ryuga play the mentor role for a change. It's been really interesting to see how his character is evolved with each new season. With Season 1 where he's still kind of establishing himself as the next user of the Garo armor. Season 2 is a much more seasoned knight operating a lot more independently than he did in the previous season, and now here in Heir to Steel Armor, he's being the senior member of the Knights, mentoring another younger knight who is going through his own struggles. So this next comment is definitely more of a Western thing going on, but it's just really nice to see a returning hero who hasn't had a new appearance in a few years actually have a return where they actually get to be badasses because they are badasses, and that's just the way it should be. God, what the hell is Hollywood doing nowadays? One of my favorite moments from Ryuga to come out of this season of Garo was this little moment early on when he's sparring with some of the other knights, and one of the younger knights comments of how great the Golden Knight is, and Ryuga actually takes offense to that comment, saying that the strength of a knight is not determined by the armor he wears. And it's just a really cool moment because it goes well with the theme, with the whole Hokage armor thing being no better or worse than the fancy suits. Just made the double sword flash moment when they're both wearing Hokage armor all the more special. And just to say it again, I really like the idea of the sword flash. Again, it's weird that Garo's gone so long without a finisher before. Not that Garo ever needed it, but as an addition to at least the Ryugaverse, I am really curious to see how they're going to handle it going forward. I hope they just don't get rid of it after the end of this season. I would love to see it again and maybe see how different techniques have evolved. That's the kind of the fun thing about the Ryugaverse, where they definitely experiment more with the capabilities of a Makai Knight, where I guess like the Kogaverse is a lot more traditional because it is the start of the show, and it's just, I don't know, it's a real fun comparison to make in my opinion. The weakest part of Heir to Steel Armor, easily, was Mitsuki's heel turn. her reveal to be the main villain feels like it comes out of nowhere. It's not properly set up. It's revealed at like the third to last episode, and before that it's not properly conveyed in my opinion. Sure, she was doing a couple weird things early on, like keeping Soma around even though you should probably be sent away for additional training. But that alone isn't really sketchy enough in my opinion to think that, oh, she may be the bad guy. It's not like she had a line of dialogue before that kind of alluded to the fact that she may have darker intentions that she may be portraying. And we've had other Makai Knights and Makai Priests make a heel turn before in this series, and I gotta say, some of those characters are some of the most beloved villains in the Garo franchise. Mitsuki doesn't hold a fucking candle to them. Well, I wouldn't call Heir to Steel Armor as like my next new favorite Garo season or anything like that. It was a lot of fun, and just seeing the franchise come back again after being on hiatus for like, what, 4 years? That was really nice to see. And I'm really excited to see what they have in store next, whatever it is, whether it's another entry in the Koga timeline, maybe they do something new and experimental like Versus Road, hell, even if they give another anime season a shot. Again, I think the anime seasons are probably my most conflicting seasons of Garo that I have watched personally, but I really enjoyed the last time they did it, which was Vanishing Line, so whatever they do, I'll be here for it. I can't wait to see what they're doing next. It's good to know that Garo is still going strong, and I'm really glad Heir to Steel Armor was something we got.